Thank you, Chair. I'll take you through, you'll notice there's two papers submitted by ourselves. One was to make sure you had a report in time for your deadline for the committee, and then we issued a supplementary report just to fill out the gaps. And the first one, because there was a timing issue about being able to bring you the results of the audit, in view of the discussions with Council and so on. But just taking a step back, the ICT 60 report has got two main functions. One is to bring you the results of the audit, and the second one is to give you a chance to make us aware of anything we need to know for our responsibilities. And just a reminder for the committee that the audit of 14-15 is carried out under the Audit Commission Act 1998, even though the Audit Commission itself finished on the 31st of March of this year. That was done because there was a continuous order for Parliament to allow the 14-15 audits to be carried out under that basis. I'll just take you through the report headlines and so on, and I'll hand over to Mike for the details. But just on page 185 of the pack, there's something there in the introduction of where we are at this stage. We're completing the substantive procedures. The stage left is on to complete the audit, and we'll be talking about that when we're talking in the context of the certificate in a moment. So, in terms of the headlines on page 186, what we propose is to be able to give an audit opinion which is unqualified. And it's important that at this point we pause and just reflect on the fact that our audit opinion across the whole of the document includes several elements. It includes the opinion on the accounts, the value for money conclusion, and also the certificate to complete the audit. And I want to take those as the committee to bear in mind of those three separate parts. Now, the audit opinion relates to the financial statements, and I say we intend to give an unqualified audit opinion based on the information we have at present. There were some audit adjustments that we've been through, and there is one unadjusted amendment that we need to get the committee's approval for management's proposal not to amend. But subject to those issues being sorted on the actual audit opinion on the statements, then our intention is to give an unqualified audit opinion. We've made some comments there about the fact that we've looked at the local authority maintained schools issue. That was, we got some guidance from SIPA after a number of years of uncertainty. There was some guidance about how to treat schools in terms of whose balance sheet they should be on, and officers have worked through that process. And we, because of the value of schools, we treated that as what we call a significant audit risk. We needed to make sure that was treated correctly. We also have a look and reporting back on the general accounts processes and audit processes, and that we've had a good experience in terms of good working relationships with the council's team, and in fact the working papers have improved this year. And I noticed in terms of the accounts, you do make a significant effort to try and explain the elements of the accounts to the public and give boxes which is not common elsewhere. As I said, we needed to write this report at the stage of making sure there's something on the agenda. And we've noted there that there were issues to complete in terms of the value for money conclusion and also the certificates. And I'll come on to those in the second report. So at that stage, what I want to do is hand over to Mike from page 188 onwards in terms of the proposed opinion, and then we'll come back to those two elements in the second report.
Thank you. Thank you. Starting at page 5 of our report, which is section 3. First of all, we give a reference to the matters arising from the audits and any particular audit adjustments that we identify. To echo what Tony's just said, there were no material adjustments to the accounts that we identified that we need to report to you, and there is only one unadjusted item which we've referred to as Appendix 2, where management would prefer not to amend the accounts. As it's not a material item, that doesn't affect our opinion, but we do need you as Audit Committee to endorse management's proposal as part of that, and to include reference to that in the letter of representation that we need you to sign. Although there were some changes to the statements, none of them have affected the year-end position on the general fund, or indeed the position in terms of expenditure on cost of services. Moving on to the next page, we were provided with a copy of the draft annual governance statement that you considered at your last meeting. Since then, the county governance statement has been updated, and indeed you're due to consider it fairly soon as part of this agenda. We have been provided with a copy of that. We provided some feedback on that statement, and on the basis of our work, we're prepared to give an opinion that is consistent with our understanding. So again, there are no concerns that we need to raise with you as part of that. Page 7 of our report, we required under standards to report the outcome of the work that we've done in relation to significant audit risks. The status of voluntary aided and voluntary controlled schools has been unclear for some time in terms of how they're accounted for. CIFA for 14-15 have issued some quite specific guidance instructions as to how they should be accounted for. So this, for all education authorities, we've been required to consider how management have dealt with that particular guidance in the accounts, and again, we're happy with, well, in terms of the way they've dealt with them here, they're a relatively small number of schools but quite high value. We've looked at the working papers provided to us and considered the management's decision around the assessment. And again, there are nothing we need to report to you in terms of the way in which that's been dealt with. And the nature of that change has been disclosed in the financial statements. Page 8 of our report referred to two inherent risks which we report at all of our bodies relating to management override of controls and the fraud risk of revenue recognition. These were flagged up in our external audit plan, which we presented to you earlier in the year. In the summary findings, we've set out the procedures that we carry out in respect of both of those risks. And again, there are no matters arising from that work that we need to bring to your attention. Page 9 of our report, we comment on the accounts production process, and there are no concerns in relation to those. Tony's already commented on the improvements which we identified this year, so we really just wanted to echo that. The audit was relatively easily carried out compared to previous years. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing the accounts on behalf of your officers in a very tight deadline and lots of working papers to be prepared. Officers were very helpful, the accounts were complete at the date we expected, and all of the working papers that we needed were presented to us in time. Where we needed additional working papers or explanations, they were made available to us in good time. So that helped considerably as part of this year, and it was certainly an improvement on previous years. There's one particular area where we've made a recommendation in Appendix 1, and that's really a follow-up of an item that we raised last year. One of the standard processes that managers carry out at the end of the year to identify any particular related parties for financial statements is to circularise elected members, to ask them to return a fairly standard year-end declaration. We drew attention to the gaps in those returns last year, and asked you as an authority to try and make sure that those gaps are addressed for this year. We're still experiencing some gaps as part of that coverage, so I guess we're repeating that recommendation. We're encouraging you to think about ways in which you can give us more complete representations as part of next year. We will follow that up with managers during the year. Of course, we'll look at that particular area again as part of next year's audit. Related to, just very briefly, the control environment, controls on key financial systems. Again, there are no specific issues that we need to bring to your attention in relation to internal control weaknesses identified during our audit. Page 10 of our report draws your attention to our again, requirement of the standards to declare our independence and objectivity. We're able to do that, and we've provided more information on that in Appendix 3. As part of our standard audit procedures, we require a letter of management representations from you, which is on the agenda and we ask you to sign. The only point I wanted to make there is, other than to ask you to include with that reference to the unadjusted items, there are no specific additional representations that we're asking from you. They are pretty much the standard representations that we expect. The rest of page 10 refers to items that are required under auditing standards to report to you, and they're there for completeness. Again, there are no points of concern that we need to bring to your attention as part of those. I won't cover page 11 because we cover that in more detail from the conclusion in the second report. And indeed, I won't go through the rest of the appendices, but I've touched on those as part of my main introduction. I mean, before we move on to the supplementary IC6 report, are there any questions on that section, which pretty much covers the accounts?
Do any members have any questions?
So just one, with regards to the disclosure of related party transactions, that's going to be spoken about later, is it?
It is going to be spoken about later, but I'm quite happy to address it here. I've already discussed this with the Assistant Director of Finance, so apologies, and understand that it has been an issue in previous years as well. As really it is an administrative process. The proposal I was going to put before members was that we issue these returns at a full council meeting and require that all members sign them on their departure, because then the job's done and it's no longer an issue. So if that could be limited, then I'm happy to discuss that going forward, but that would seem to just get rid of that issue altogether.
Well, the question I was going to ask, I mean, is it the same people who are doing it year on year, or is it just people not understanding what they should be doing?
I'll ask the Assistant Director of Finance to respond to that, but this last year, because of the timing of the election, and the fact that we had new members coming in and previous members departing, that added to the issue that we had in previous years. Have we had repeat offenders?
Yeah, through you, Chair. We have had some repeat offenders, but I think the major impact this year was obviously with the election pending. Some members didn't return their form, but I think we can take on board the suggestion that we've made and see if we can improve performance next year.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions at all? No. I don't have any further questions on the report, but I did just want to comment as well on your comments about the quality of the audit papers and improvement on previous years. And I understand we have a new member of the finance team, Andrew Merry, who's been with us just over a year now, and the Assistant Director of Finance is very clear that you've been a key element in the improvement of those audit papers. So we appreciate your efforts on that front. Thank you. Okay. Would you like to move on to your second report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the second report deals with the value from the conclusion and the certificate. Because the second invoice was withdrawn by the Assistant Director of Finance from the accounts, there was no impact on the accounts of the issue that came out. So it was down to the value for money conclusion. And what we're required to do is look at the arrangements in place. And although the original incident happened in 2011, the issue was then in place in 14-15. So although it appeared in April 2015, it's clear that the Council was looking at or working on the basis that that was in place. So what we then need to do is say, well, how does that map to our value for money conclusion in terms of arrangements? And what we've come to the view is that, and it sets out in the paper, it's a relatively short second paper, but I'll just summarise it, is that the arrangements were not adequate enough didn't reach that standard. So what we're looking to do is to qualify the value for money conclusion on the grounds of one of the criteria, instead of saying, well, which criteria should apply. And the financial resilience criteria is first we looked at that, but in terms of the impact on the Council, we don't think that's big enough really to say that there's the financial resilience of the Council was at risk. It's to do with the economy, efficiency, effectiveness arrangements that we need to then say, well, okay, they were not sufficient. There was a flaw, there was a mistake, the Council admitted there was a mistake made, which then has caused the arrangements to be undermined effectively. So when we issue the audit opinion, the value for money section will have what's called an except for conclusion to say that there's a qualification on the basis that the arrangements were adequate with the exception of that area. So then we move on to the certificate, and that moves then back to the wider role of the public sector auditor. And it's not just about the Council, not just about value for money conclusion. One of the things we have to do as an auditor of any body that is overseen by the Audit Commission Act to consider, is there any issue where we need to consider the need to issue a public interest report? There are other aspects as well, such as the power of the auditor to issue a written recommendation that have to be considered by the full council, Section 11 recommendation. What I've also had today is some representations from members of the public raising issues of concern. I haven't raised what would constitute an objection to the accounts, but have raised issues. But also, as you now see, I'd issued this report prior to those coming in today. And what I've come to the view is that I need to take time to consider those other powers and responsibilities. So what we'll be doing is withholding the certificate to allow us to take a step back and look at all of the processes involved, look at the issues, and to see whether any of those extra due roles and responsibilities under the Audit Commission Act should be applied. Obviously, I can take into account the fact that the Council has produced a report in the public domain, and the Council has worked to try and address the issue that arose. Equally, though, the fact is that there's no overriding rule of public money that I need to take into account the impact of what's happened and consider whether there's anything else that I need to do in terms of my responsibilities. I don't need the public's observations to be in the format of an objection to take their views into account. I don't need an objection to do that. It's my decision whether I want to do that for my own purposes. If there was an objection, then that would force the issue. But I would just say it's decided that I needed to take time to have a work further with officers. Obviously, this is a very busy time in terms of our workload, in terms of getting local government. All of local government has a deadline at the end of September. It wouldn't be appropriate to try and rush anything through. We need to take time to step back, talk to officers, work out how what's happened maps to our responsibilities, and take that decision. And we'll obviously be talking with officers as we go through that process. So to summarise, the value for money conclusion is qualified, and the certificate is withheld to allow those further reviews to take place.
I have to say I welcome that delay, actually, given the situation where we've only been able to share with the public the position just over a week ago. I think it's very important that the public do have the opportunity to raise any objections via the independent external auditors. Yes. So I think it's important that we allow you sufficient time to be able to complete that exercise so that you can then come back to us and hopefully confirm that you're happy with the processes that have been put in place. Subsequently.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one option available, because the issue arose in 15-16, effectively by merging in 15-16, one option would be to issue the certificate in 14, but I don't feel that would be appropriate in terms of due process. Perhaps because at that point it's only been just over a week since the report was in the public domain because of the discussions that are going on. So I felt the appropriate thing to do was with a certificate to allow that process. There is a different process in place next year when there's a set time for objections to be made, but the fact is this audit is under the Audit Commission Act, which allows electors to make representations and objections if they are registered electors right up until the point the certificate is given.
Okay, thank you. Do any members have any queries specifically about that certificate and that process?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I didn't quite catch, is there a deadline for these observations to come in? Or
the right to make an objection to an audit, a formal objection, is up until the point to which the certificate is issued. So what I can do is issue the audit opinion with the qualified value for money conclusion. At the bottom of it there will be a note saying that the certificate is withheld, and therefore the right of any registered elector to make representations to and make an objection to it on the 14-15 audit is then still open.
So do you have in mind a timescale at this stage? Or?
I think we need to take stock
okay.
and then have a look. Obviously, there's a lot of issues flying around, so yes. We need to I wouldn't want to stick to a timetable. It's got to be right.
Yes.
Bottom line. As a guide, if a full objection comes in, the Audit Commission's expectation is that it's dealt with within 9 months. But sometimes they can be much shorter than that. Occasionally, it can be much longer than that. Depends on the complexity of the issue, because it goes into a due process and becomes a quasi-legal process if there's an objection. But what I'm doing is looking to see whether I need to exercise any powers or responsibilities under the 14-15 audit. That doesn't preclude me from looking again in terms of the 15-16 audit, because obviously it flowed into that here as well.
Can I request then that we have an update at the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which I believe is early January, if you haven't yet reached a point whereby you're happy to complete that piece of work?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we'll keep in contact with officers as well, and I'm happy to update you between that meeting.
Could I ask you how many observations you've had so far?
Several emails today, how you define observations, but there's been correspondence from more than one person.
From more than one person?
That's right.
Yes. And do they come from all over the county?
I haven't checked the geography of them, but the people involved said they were registered electors. There is the power to make an observation to an auditor is not restricted to registered electors. Anybody can make any representation to any auditor about any audit. The power that is given to registered electors in a particular area is to make a formal objection. So that's the difference.
Sorry, can I be clear? So far you have not received a formal objection, you received observations.
The objection process is set out. There's a requirement in the Audit Commission Act as to what an objection must tick several boxes. The observations I've had so far have not reached that standard, but that doesn't inhibit me in any way in taking those things into account, or the observations made into account. So for my own purposes, I've already decided to withhold the certificate. So the objection process is there for people to use if they wish to, but I don't need that trigger to be able to follow and justify what I wish to do myself for my own purposes.
Thank you. That's much clearer.
Yes, that's helpful.
I do appreciate it's quite a complicated process and it's poison law.
Okay, so I think the key thing at this stage is I'd like to emphasise that what we've heard from the auditors that you're intending to issue an unqualified opinion on the statement of accounts. Yeah. So in terms of the actual accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2015, correct. We've got an unqualified opinion. The value for money opinion has been issued as being qualified at this stage, but further work to be performed before the certificate can be issued.
Just not issued yet.
Not issued yet, thank you. So are there any further questions on this item from the members?
I perhaps should just add, if that's okay, Chair, if an observation comes in which causes doubt about the accounts, and it could be something completely unrelated to the open development, then I'd have to take that into account. What I can do is also revisit the opinion once I've done my review of the other areas in terms of roles and responsibilities, and if needs be, I could go back and change that opinion. So until the certificate is given, effectively the opinion and the conclusion are not finalised.
So we can consider that to be a draft unqualified opinion on the statement of accounts at this stage?
It's my opinion at this stage, yes.
Yes,
So
yeah.
to
be confirmed. Yeah. Okay. In that case, can I confirm that members are happy to receive the annual governance report as we've just discussed it? And then we need to move on to consider the letter of representation that I believe you've got in Appendix 1. I'm going to, as I believe you all sent this in advance, I'm going to assume that all members have read the letter of representation.